challah making time. So we've got the ingredients here. I use honey instead of salt, instead of sugar, but I do need some sugar to get the yeast activated. There's only a small amount. That's the yeast. Then you've got olive oil and salt. I put 2 eggs in this recipe and flour. So it's in the listing of the recipe thing, but 750 grams of flour needed, 7 grams of dry yeast if you're using dry yeast, and I forget the measurements of the other stuff, but it'll be on the list. So I've got the water here, and the water is 330 grams of combined hot and cold. And again, in the recipe, it shows you the amounts of hot to cold. So I think it's 360 grams in total, and 220 will be cold, and the rest will be hot. So it gives it a nice temperature. The water, forgotten how much water, again, recipe. And I will just put in a teaspoon of sugar and just mix that in a bit. And then all I want to do is sprinkle the yeast over the top of it. So in about, I don't know, 5 minutes, from being very powdery, it'll get absorbed and bubbles should start showing. So that shows the yeast is active. You can do it without it, and I've done it without it before, but it's just a bit of a safer bet, just checking the yeast is active, because we can have these things in our cupboards for yonks and just don't get used. So that's just got to process for 10 minutes. The flour, the 750 mils of flour, to that I'm just going to add the basic ingredients before we put that in. We're going to start doing that part now. So 1 egg, 2 eggs on top of the flour. You then want to have 30 mils of oil. I tried it with more than 30 mils and it was just too sticky. Okay, I've made a silly person's mistake. I didn't zero off the scales when I put the oil in. That's now zeroed off. Just need to make that up to 30. Yeah. So the eggs are in, the oil goes in the bowl, and then the honey. And the honey is the 64 grams, that's zeroed off. So this, just instead of using sugar, it feels healthier. And you can be plus or minus on this. You want slightly more honey taste going through. That's 64 grams, that's the 64 grams of honey. None of that. And you need some salt. Now for this, I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons. Generally go put a bit more in. Okay, so that's the salt done. Oil's in there, yeast's in there. Yeast done, sugar, water, salt, honey, and eggs. So the only thing we're going to do is now pour our yeast, which actually, as I picked it up, it's just started to explode nicely. So I know that's working, that's fine. So I'll just add that in. And then, so that only takes a few minutes to do to get this lot ready. This you can put in a mixer with the bread hook, and then it'll just churn it round nicely. Or you can do it this way, so no machinery at all needed, so truly by hand. And there are different looking sort of gadgets, but a flexible piece of rubbery substance is absolute plastic, is absolutely fine. So that's got the bulk going together with this. I will now, so I've still got a fair bit of flour in the bottom, which hasn't merged in. This is very, very rough. You can see it, it looks tatters and rough. So we're going to just work on this with our hands. This is the same motion I tend to use for my sourdough, which is just using fingers, picking up, putting down. It takes a bit longer with challah to do. Now, the other option is taking it out of the bowl and kneading it in a more traditional way. I don't know why, but I find this one therapeutic. I don't need to hammer it around as much. And it really doesn't take long for it to start coming into a ball. And what I'll do is I'll leave it for 3/4 of an hour to an hour, cover with a tea towel, come back and then do another round of this. I think it probably works out about 20-30 times of the pulling and pushing that I do. But it's good for working up the gluten. And this is looking pretty good. It's sticky, but not too sticky. So it's forming into a ball. So what I'm going to do is leave that just to prove a little bit, and then I'll come back to it and we'll do the next stage together. Okay, I just wanted to show you the first mixing. So this has been in the just under a tea towel for about 3/4 of an hour. So the same as my sourdough, pick up, put down, pick up, put down. Just using the top of my fingers. I don't want to actually push all of the air out of this, because what we want is it to become nice and airy. So if you just pick up, it stretches the dough, increases the gluten, which is important, and just keep going around. And I tend to turn it over and around once more. And even now, there's only the second phase of proving. I can still feel it starting to become much springier and much more stretchy. And if you put your fingers into it, sort of, you can feel the air cushion inside. So that's just after 2 relatively short provings, and I would recommend one more proving, and then just leave it. And that depends again on temperature. I'd leave it for a couple of hours, and then just I'll show you once what mine looks like once I feel it's ready to start taking out and platting. That's the next stage. Okay, here I've realised that my recording hasn't come through, so I'm just dubbing over it. So what I'm doing now is just getting the dough out of the bowl. You do need to be careful here not to squeeze it, not to tug it. So what you want to do is to leave as much of the air inside you possibly can. So just go gentle on it. First thing we want to do is split it into three, because we're going to have three strands that we're going to plait. So typically I find it easier just putting it on the scales, see how much total is, and then I can get a reasonable approximation for the three. I'm not too fastidious about it, but as long as it's roughly right. Otherwise you're going to get one very skinny strand and a very thick one and somewhere in between, and the finished product looks a bit messy. So I don't use many baking tools, but I really do like that metal scraper. It scrapes the flour off nicely. It also has got a good cut to it. Okay, so borrow a bit from one of the other blobs and add it on. I seem to remember them being pretty accurate and pretty okay. I certainly don't go down to exact grams for all of them. Okay, snuff weighing. Excellent. Maybe I am fastidious. Who knew? So I tend to just pull it apart a little bit now, particularly if I've added some blobs. So this gives it a better chance to just integrate. And just rolling the first one up. Now I haven't added any extra flour at the moment, so this is straight out of the bowl. If yours is really sticky, then you might want to add some flour to the board, but not very much. And part of the problem, as soon as you add the flour, you then don't get the resistance of the flour against the board, so it's a little bit more difficult to roll. So if I can, I prefer to do the first rolling without any flour. So I'm just getting those done. So you can see it really doesn't take very long to do. Okay, final strand. All looking good. Just a few extra tweaks to make sure they look nice and ready. So now I'm going to put some flour on, but it really is only just a very light dusting. And this I do because otherwise I find when I'm doing the bead, when I'm putting them together, they tend to stick, and I prefer it not to stick. I just find it a little bit more difficult to work with. So just a very light coating of flour. The word I was looking for before was plaiting, when I'm doing the plaiting. Okay, all nice and ready. So then what you do, you put them vertically, have them vertically in front of you. And it's right over left, left over the middle, right over the middle, left over the middle, right over the middle. And go down as far as you can, even when it's sort of tiny amounts at the bottom, and just tuck the ends under. Then I turn it round. Instead of right over left, it's left over right, left over the middle, right over the middle, left over the middle, right over the middle. Okay, now it's the final part of the preparation.
I've put the challah on some greaseproof paper because it'd make it easier in a minute when I transfer it. But for the moment, I'm just coating the dough with a beaten egg. So it's a whole of a beaten egg, and just lay it over quite a thin layer, really. No need to make a mess. You just get into all the little joins and folds. Okay, all nicely done. And now if you want to add something like sesame seeds, it's the right time to do it, so they'll stick nicely to the surface of the bread. The egg wash holds it. And then you want to put the bread in the oven, which should be preheated 170, and you'll be leaving it in there for about 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
Okay, and here we have the finished challah. Looking pretty good.